Hi and welcome to the fourth part of the Asteroids tutorial for the Godot Engine. When we left off in the previous video, we had just made it so that when the player hits an asteroid with a missile, it splits into 3 smaller pieces. But we still hadn't really added any gameplay elements to it, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make it so that whenever the player hits an asteroid, the player gets score, and whenever the player accidentally bounces into an asteroid, he loses health. And when there are no asteroids left on the screen, we're going to spawn new asteroids and the player will get a new life. So the first thing that we need to do to see what we are doing is to add some kind of UI to the game, so that both the player and then we as the developer can follow along how much score and how much health you have. So I'm going to create a new node. Select Control, and I'm going to name this UI. Next I'm going to add a label in here for the score. So add child node. And under Control we have a label. So this allows us to print text onto the screen. So initially I'm just going to input the text score and then something like 500, just so we can see something on the screen. But this default font that we have here is quite ugly. I would like a custom font. So I've found one that's free and available on the web, so I'm going to import that. So open the resource folder, and on the fonts I have this Kenney Future Narrow. So let's create a folder to keep everything organized. Call this UI, right click and show in File Manager, and then drag the font into this folder. So now it shows up in Godot. Next, under label here, we're going to go down, and under custom fonts, we're going to create a new dynamic font. And if we press that, we can set the default size and which font to use. So I'm just going to take this and drag it into the font data field. And next I'm going to set the default size to something like 24. So now you can see that we have a much more beautiful font here. We should also rename this label score, so that we know which node we are accessing. Next, I don't want the score to be up here in the top left corner. I want it to be centered to the right, so that I can have the health bar to the left. So I'm going to go to Anchor and set it to left 1. This will tell Godot from which direction we are referring to when we set the position. So with 1, it means that we are referring to the right part of the screen. And then we can take this and we can drag it over here. Next, if this were to increase, I want it to be centered to the right so that it's always close to the right corner of the screen. So we're going to go up and set the alignment to right. And then we're going to go down. So we set the size flag horizontal to expand, and then the grow direction horizontal to begin. So by setting these settings, when the content of this label increases, it will actually move towards the left and stay anchored to the right side. So we can try this by entering a number of zeros here, and we'll see that it grows in that direction. So now we have created this label, but we want to connect it to a value that we can change programmatically. So to do that, I'm going to create a script. So we go down under script and we set new script. And by default it wants to call it score and put it directly in the root, but we want to keep things organized, so we move it into the UI directory and save. So here we have our new score script. So first we want to define the variable that stores the score as an integer. So we say var score equals 0. But we want to be able to modify this from within the GUI. So we do it by saying export. So now if we go in here and go up, we will have a score here. But that's not enough. We also want it to update the string whenever we change that value. So we can create a function that does this. So we call func set score, new score. And then when this function is called, we say text equals score colon plus new score. So we set the text to score plus new score. But since this is an integer and this is a string, we first need to convert this into a string as well to be able to use the plus operator here. So we do it like this. So this will concatenate, it will combine these two strings. And then we need to set the actual value, like this. But having a function like this is a bit bothersome, because we have to invoke that particular function whenever we want to change the score. We want to be able to do it automatically by just changing this variable. And there is an amazing feature for doing this in Godot, and it's called a setGet. So by writing setGet setScore, it will use this function to set the value. So we don't have to call this manually, it will be done automatically. And not only setting the value, but also updating the label. And to make sure that it's always set when the node is added to the tree, we can call setGet manually, like this. But we also want to be able to see these changes in the GUI now, so we can debug and make sure that everything is working correctly. So we can do that by changing this into a tool script. However, a word of warning here, when you change something into a tool script, it will run all the time inside the editor. So only make sure that the code is working before doing it. But it's done by writing tool in the beginning here. So if we switch back to the scene, we can see that we now have score 0. And if we change the score to 100, it will immediately update the GUI. So next, let's add the health bar. So I want the health to be visualized to the user by showing a number of ships on the screen. So to do that, we're going to add a grid container, which will contain all these icons. So click on the UI here, and then the plus, and add a grid container. We can call this health. We can drag it down a little bit so it has a certain margin to the top left corner. Then we can set the number of columns, and I want the health to start wrapping down to a second row if it reaches over 5. So we set the columns to 5. Next, let's add a prototype, a first icon for the showing this. So I'm going to make sure the health is selected and add a new control. And this will just be the parent of the icon. We can call this health icon, and we can go down under rect here and set the minimum size to something like 32 by 32. So this will make sure that it's shaped like a square. We can also go under health and add a certain padding between elements by setting the custom constants height separation to something like 8 pixels. Next, let's add the image. So we press the plus and add a sprite. We can call this simple icon. And then we go under ship, and we can reuse the same sprite as we used for the ship here. So I'm dragging that into the texture here, and then we can scale it down a bit because it's very large. We set transform and set the scale to something like 0.15%. Something like that. And it would also look good if the ship is rotated a little bit, so that it doesn't point directly towards the right. I'm going to set the rotation to 135. Something like that. Next you can see that the ship is centered over here, even though the icon is down here. So we need to move it down a little bit. So we'll set the position to something like 16 by 16. So now it's positioned in the center of the icon. So we can try out the settings now by just duplicating the health icon. And here we can see that it's positioned to the right and with a certain spacing in between. And here you can see that it starts wrapping around. Let's add a certain V separation as well, so that it has a padding even in the vertical direction. But we don't want to manually sit and duplicate these icons, we want them to be in a separate subscene. So we remove all these, then we right click on the health icon, and we save a branch as scene. Put it in UI and call it health icon. Next, similarly to how we did it with the score, we want the number of icons to be automatically updated to match the current health. So to do that, we can add a script to the health node. So select health, go down to the bottom, and new script. So the basic principle is pretty much the same as with the score. We add an export variable, set setGet to a function that we define, and update the health inside this function. We also make sure to call it in the ready method. But since the health bar doesn't extend label but a grid container, we can't just update the text field. We have to manually add and remove sprites from it. So to do that, we're going to check if the number of children to this node is less than the desired health. So say if get child count, the number of children that we currently have, the number of icons that is showing, is less than the new health. In that case, we want to iterate from the current number of children up until the desired health to make sure that we can add that many icons. So for I in range get child count, the current count, and the desired health. Next we want to do pretty much the same thing, except that we check if the new health is less than the current child count. In that case, we need to remove entities. So we switch places with these two. And here we should remove. Now, so how do we actually add and remove children dynamically? Well, first we need to preload the subscene that we created, the health icon. And we've done it before a few times, so I'm not going to go into detail. Then we enter the path. And then we can just use instance to create an instance for it. So since the health script extends from a grid container, which is a layout manager, it means that we don't manually have to set the position of the new node. It will be done automatically when we just add it ourselves. So we can just call add child. As this is being invoked, we're going to remove children one by one. So the only child that is safe to remove each time is the child with the index that is equal to the new health. So we say var child equals get child new health. And then we can remove that. We can clean it up a little bit. And lastly, we changed it into a tool script so that we can see it in the GUI. We switch back to the 2D scene and we can see that it is updated automatically, even though we don't see any more nodes here. So we press this and go in here, we can change it to 5, we can change it to 1, we can change it to 22. You'll see that it updates automatically. So remember, for all our previous objects we've added to the scene, we have chosen to save it away as a subscene just to keep everything organized. However, if we do that with the UI right now, we won't be able to access the score and the health from within the other scripts, because it would be a sub-node of that subscene. So to solve that, we can add a script to the UI that allows us to control the health in a programmatic way. So we go under UI, go down, and we create a new script, put it as well in the UI folder. And here we can remove most of these default generated things. So we want to define 3 functions here. So we want to be able to increase the health whenever we clear the screen, and we want to be able to decrease the health whenever we crash into an asteroid. And we also want to be able to increase the score whenever we hit an asteroid with a missile. So those are the 3 functions that we're going to define. Increase health increases it with 1. Decrease 1 decreases it with 1. And the increase score increases it with a variable amount. Next, we want this function to access the inner nodes here. So we need to find those when we load it. So we create a onReady var score node equals get node score. And we do the same thing with the health, like this. Now when we want to increase the health, we simply take the health node and we increase the health. And this will automatically call the setHealth function. Decreasing it is just as easy. And the score, we simply take score plus equals amount, like this. We should also check if the score has decreased below 0, because it means that we have lost the game and we should reload. So if health node health is less or equal to 0, in that case we take get 3, reload current scene. It will restart the game. Now we can save away the UI as a separate subscene and save branches scene. So let's invoke those new functions that we created. First, let's make it so that when the missile hits an asteroid, we get score. So we go under the missile script, and then we need to find the UI node. So we say onReady var UI equals get tree, because we don't necessarily know where in the tree it is. We want to be able to move nodes around without breaking the code. So we take get tree, then we access the current scene, and then we take get node. We expect the UI to always reside in the root. Then, when the missile hits a node with an explode signal, we should increase the score. So we say UI increase score with something like 100. So we can try this out. We can see that the score updates whenever I hit an asteroid. So let's do the same thing with the health. We go under the ship. We can copy this access, since it's in the global space, over to the ship. But currently the ship doesn't actually check for collisions, it just bounces around with the default physics. So we need to copy that as well. So we go back to the missile and we copy paste this integrate forces stuff. Go back into the ship, go down under integrate forces, and before we do these things, we check for collisions. So we iterate over the contacts, we get the contact collider objects, we check it if it has the explode script, if it is an asteroid. But instead of doing these things, we simply take UI and decrease the health. and if this decreases the health below 0, it will restart the game. We remove 100 here, since we always decrease the health 1 at a time, but then we need to add one more thing. The integrate forces function, by default, it doesn't store the number of contacts that has happened, it simply processes things using the default physics. So, like we did with the missile, we need to go up under the ready and set max contacts reported to 1, and this will tell Godot to store the actual contacts that has happened. So now we can try it. If I hit, you see that my health is decreasing until the game is restarted. So far we've made it so that the player can, fly around, shoot stuff, and will actually get score and lose health, and we've even added a restart. However, it's not really a game yet, and the reason for that is that there are no levels. If we clear the screen, we'll just fly around endlessly in empty space. So we need to add some kind of level system to this. To do that, first we're going to go to the 2D scene here, and then we're going to clear away all of these debug things that we added so far. We remove the asteroids, we remove the missile, we can move the ship to the center. Next, let's add a level object. So go under Game and add a node 2D, and we call it level. So this will be responsible for respawning new asteroids whenever the screen is cleared. So to do that, we add a script, we call it level, but we put it in the level folder. So since this script is going to be responsible for spawning asteroids, it needs to be able to access those subscenes. So we create a var asteroid small equals preload, and then the path. Then we can copy this and do the same for the medium and the large ones. Like this. Next we need to keep track of which level we are at. So we set export var level equals 0. And then we need to define how many asteroids should be spawned for each level, so that there are more and more asteroids being spawned for every time we clear the screen. So we say export var asteroids per level. And by default we can set it to something like 2. We can remove the ready function, and instead under process delta we check if the number of children to this node is equal to 0. In that case we want to spawn new asteroids. So first we need to increment the level to increase the difficulty. Next we create a for loop to iterate over the amount of asteroids to spawn. And the number of asteroids is equal to the level multiplied with the asteroids per level. But we don't want all of the asteroids to look exactly the same, so we should randomize which of these sizes is being generated. So we can do that with the match statement. Match, and then we use rand_i to create a random integer. And this random integer can be between 0 and an extremely large value, so we should use modulo to get a value that is either 0, 1 or 2. So if it is 0, we should set the child to asteroid small.instance, and if it's equal to 1, we should set it to asteroid medium instance, and if it's equal to 2, we set it to asteroid large instance. Next we add it to ourselves. But we don't want all of the asteroids to spawn at exactly the same position, so we can create a variable called where that will hold the position where it's being spawned. And then we set the position to that. So what should where have as a value? Well, we could just put it somewhere randomly on the screen, but that might not be very good, because if the position is at the same place as the player, it can be very annoying that you die immediately because an asteroid spawned at your position. So to control this, I'm going to create a parameter here called safe radius and set it to something like 200. So no asteroid will spawn within 200 pixels of the player. Next we need to know where the ship is actually at. So to do that, we say onReady var ship equals get3 current scene find node ship. So whenever the level node is being created, it will look up the ship node in the tree and store it away here. So in that way we can just set a vector like avoid to the ship position. So by default we will set the position that it spawned at exactly at the ship position. However, as long as this condition is currently valid, the where minus avoid, the difference between where we want to put the asteroid and where the player is at, has a length, the vector length, that is less or equal to the safe radius. It means that we are trying to put the asteroid in an illegal position. So if this condition is valid, we will iterate over this over and over and over again. However, we want to spawn it somewhere on the screen. So to do that, we need to know the size of the screen. So up here, outside the loop, we can say var viewport equals get viewport get visible rect and then size. And then inside the loop, we set where x equals a random value in a certain range between 0 and viewport x. And we set the y coordinates to the same thing but y. So initially we want to spawn it at the player's position, but as long as the spawning position is within the safe radius of the player, we will change the position into a random position inside the viewport. So this will iterate until it finds a position that's available. Next, we can also randomize it a little bit by making it move in a random direction and also move with a random speed. So to control that, we're going to create two parameters, the max speed and the min speed. Then we want to make it move in a random direction, so we say var angle equals a random value multiplied by pi multiplied by 2. So since a random value is by default between 0 and 1, we will scale it up with pi multiplied by 2, which is one entire rotation. Next we want the random speed, so say var speed equals rand range between min speed and max speed. And then we set the linear velocity. So the linear velocity should be equal to a vector with the same length as the speed. And then we should rotate that vector into the correct angle. And it's quite easy. Lastly, like we did with the missile and with the ship, we want the health to be modified whenever this logic is being called. So we need to access the UI node. We can do it with the same method as here, except the ship. We look for the UI that is called UI. And then whenever the screen is cleared, we want to take the UI and increase health. So it will give you one more health whenever you clear the screen. But there is one thing that isn't exactly working here. So this function is going to be called immediately as the game starts. And it will see that this doesn't contain any asteroids. It will increase the one and immediately you are at level number 1. And it will spawn 2 new asteroids. So we wanted it to start with 1 asteroid, because otherwise we'll get, we will get 1 extra health from what we set as the initial value, and we'll get 1 more asteroid than we thought. So an easy fix for this is to simply spawn an asteroid immediately. So we go here, and we press this link icon, we navigate to the asteroid and add a asteroid lodge. We can move it away a little bit so that it isn't immediately colliding with the player. We can even move it down a little bit. And now you're pretty safe at the beginning. And here 2 new were spawned. So that's all for this video. In the next video we're going to take it one step further and making it more like a real game by adding something like a main menu and also a high score. So thank you for watching.